This is the Digital Savage Experience Podcast, hosted by Prokopchuk, bringing you all things digital marketing, tech, business, and motivation. What's stopping you from becoming relentless in all aspects of life? Are you ready to become a digital savage? Let's get into today's episode.
Hey everyone, this is Prokopchuk, and this is the Digital Savage Experience Podcast. Today I have with me Angela Henderson. Angela is the founder of the highly successful online store Finlee and Me, which evolved into Angela Henderson Consulting. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good. Pleasure to have you on.
Yes, pleasure to be here. It's always great to connect with new people from around the world and learn about their own experiences and help your audience. So yes, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey? Where did you get started? How did you get to where you are now?
Sure, I'd love to. So almost 10 years ago, because my little one will be 10, I was looking at businesses initially, and then Finlee, my almost 10-year-old, came along, and I was just sitting there one day going, listen, there's got to be something better than the toys that are on the market that are all plastic and battery operated. And, let me just put a caveat out there. Yes, I do have those toys in my house, but I was going, there's going to be something else that kids can kind of spark their own imagination and really have a good time and fun. And that's when I started outsourcing wooden toys for kids to work on their fine motor skill development, spark imagination, imaginary play, and creating ultimately childhood memories through play, love, and travel. And I started my first business, which was Finlee and Me. We've been going now for 9 years, and we've just wrapped up, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. And that was an e-commerce platform. At one stage, we had 1,400 different educational toys and baby products that we were selling. And through that platform, I also had another monetary stream, which was I was one of Australia's leading parenting bloggers. I was asked to work with Netflix as one of their top 30 bloggers. I worked with major cruise lines, major supermarkets here in Australia, both national and internationally. And through Finlee and Me, I guess you could say that my reputation started to grow, which is always great. And I started to get asked for advice. And I remember looking at my diary, and there's about 14 cups of coffee or pick my brain sessions that I had with individuals. And I realized, well, hold on a minute. If I charge for my expertise for each of these, I can then turn this into a secondary business. And so approximately 3 years ago, I started Angela Henderson Consulting. And that's kind of where my journey is at now, is through Finlee and Me. I've now ended up as a business consultant and coach, working with women in business to help them move from really being stuck and overwhelmed and having, too much of their time working in their business to helping them create the strategy and clarity they need in order to grow 6- and 7-figure businesses. So that's a little bit about my business journey and where I'm at today.
That's awesome. So what kind of motivated you to get into that in terms of the company? How did you get into the kind of blogging space as well?
Yeah, so I guess my motivation, a little bit more on that, is just, looking at Finlee and just going, there's got to be something else there that we can bring into Australia that's different than what all the major, I guess, chains are, producing. So it was kind of my motivator. My second motivator was, again, I'm just a strong, I guess, minded woman. And so I guess I was like, surely I can make this work. And I just started off at local markets. I didn't even have a website. And then when I saw that things started to take off at the markets and we were having, $1,500, $2,000 days, I was like, clearly if I put this online, it'll be, it should grow even bigger, which it did. And then with the blogging, I realized that my audience, which is moms, which is great, and they're the ones buying for their kids, that they're the buyer, and obviously because they're buying for the kids, that's great. But I was missing out on a component that I could start building relationships with those moms. So that's when I started blogging, not just about things that like the top 10 educational toys or whatever, because moms would start to get bored of that. I started to survey my audience and ask them questions like, what are you struggling with? What does your day-to-day look like? And through that, I found that a lot of women were suffering from postnatal depression. And so as a trained mental health clinician of 15 years, I did my training here in Australia, and then I did my clinical prac in North Carolina. I was able to write about topics like anxiety and depression, not only for women, but also for children. And it was through being able to build those connections on different levels that when I did sell my actual products, the moms had a relationship with me and they were happy to support the overall business and buy for their children. So, and then I just started to get more and more hits to my website. And then I started to reach out to different, agencies in here in Australia that work with influencers and bloggers. And then it was, again, by building those ongoing connections with my peers and other businesses that, I was asked to join the Netflix team over here in Australia to blog for them.
No, that's awesome. So what motivates you to succeed on a personal level in all those endeavors?
On a personal level? Listen, my kids play a small component of it, yes, but what motivates me to succeed is just that, again, I'm, like I said earlier, a strong woman, and I want to see more women in business succeed, but I also want to be able to make a bigger impact in the world. And I guess mental health is a significantly strong cause that I'm an advocate for. And for me is, if I'm able to be successful, I then have more opportunities. And when I have more opportunities, I've got a bigger voice to be able to advocate for mental health. And if I've got a bigger voice, I'm going to be able to make that bigger impact. So what really motivates me is being able to get to a point in business, we're almost there, where I can set up a secondary, either a foundation or a not-for-profit, and I start looking at ways of either, starting some programs over here for mental health for adults. Yeah, we haven't quite figured it out, but that's the end goal that keeps motivating me every day to keep doing a little bit more, is the bigger impact that I can leave for those with a mental illness.
That's great. I think mental health is often kind of a overlooked part of society. And
100%.
Especially in the United States, I don't think the system does a good job to provide the services and, like you said, to advocate for those with mental health issues and ways they can cope and kind of live their lives productively with a mental illness.
In Australia, I can't speak on the stats for America. I know they'd be much greater because your population is much greater. But in Australia, we have 8 people that take their lives every single day, which it works out roughly to about 2,400, 2,500 people a year. We have less road toll deaths, so driving in a car in whatever, do you know what I mean? An accident happens on the roads. We have about, say, 600 to 700 people, unfortunately, that die during each year because of the road tolls. However, there's 10 times more funding for the roads than there is for mental illness. But yet, so the road tolls have about 600 to 700 people that pass away. Suicide is about 2,400 to 2,500 or more every year. But yet we only get 1/10 of the funding to try and help with prevention. So I'm not minimizing those people who have unfortunately passed away on the roads. I still think, for those families, very horrific. But I just think that there's an imbalance and a disconnect with our government and the priorities of where money probably needs to go in to help with more early intervention.
I agree. I think depression is also big, like you mentioned, postpartum depression. And there's a lot of kind of depression on the entrepreneur space. So, entrepreneurship is often a lonely journey, which, one undertakes mostly on their own and is
yes.
A lot of stresses and doesn't necessarily have the avenues or kind of the channels to, express themselves or kind of get that out. So there's been a lot of cases here and around the world, startup founders, CEOs taking their life because of, all the pressures and all the depression that they were going through.
Yes, 100%. And I think, again, in this space is just as moms feel the burden on their shoulders about everything they need to do with their children, I think entrepreneurs equally feel that from a distribution point of, oh my goodness, I've got to make this money or else how am I going to pay my bills? And the pressure is different, but it's similar in regards to what people are putting themselves under. And as you said, not a lot of people talk about it. There's a little bit like a burnout here or, how to prevent burnout and that, but there's not really that talk about. There's a level of burnout and then there's a level of when you've actually got a full-blown diagnosis, right? Where it's to the point where when I first started my first business, I also, like I said, was a mental health clinician during the day. So I worked 5 days a week also. And it was through that, unfortunately, that there was some workplace bullying that went on, and that led to my own depression and anxiety for a couple of years. And it wasn't because of the entrepreneur journey, but it was still one of those things that I just look back and I'm like, no one really talks about it. So when I do talk about it, the amount of emails I get, I was here at Australia's leading podcast conference last year, and I was speaking with Pat Flynn on a panel, and we were talking about like what impact do you want to leave through your podcast and things like that. And that was one of the things again that I go back to, is that mental health journey, because so many people don't talk about it. And once I opened up about my own mental illness, but also just talking about it, I'd say 40 to 50% of that room throughout the next couple of days of that particular conference then, came up to me and either shared a story of their own experience of mental health or their relatives' experience of mental health or a friend, and thanked me again so much for opening up about that. So that's kind of, my motivator, you could say. In addition, obviously my kids are part of my why and a bit of my motivator, but they're not all of my why.
Oh, that's awesome. And I especially in the United States, because me and my wife are foster parents. So the children are oftentimes being taken away because of the mental illness of their parents or guardians.
100%. Yeah.
And a lot of the time I feel like the parents themselves don't get the adequate services, or the system truly doesn't understand what's even wrong with them. So a lot of the time, some of the mental illnesses are hereditary. So some of the outbursts and stuff of the children in foster care and some of the children we've had on a short-term basis have, different things that trigger them out of nowhere, and they've never properly been evaluated, so they can't really get the help that they need. It just a lot of the times attributed to ADHD, or, this is ADHD or ADD. And it's never really identified.
And the thing is, in America, I know when I was a clinician in North Carolina, now obviously each state is quite different in regards to their fundings, and then both state funding and federal funding and that. And, and when I was in North Carolina, there was a big change, a reform with the mental health there. And, you had to have particular diagnoses, which again, obviously lead to a label and a particular severity. And a lot of times ADHD is what they give you, but unfortunately I'm not minimizing ADHD, but there's no, it's not enough, quote unquote, air quote, to be able to get the funding that those families need to get the support for their kids to potentially, say, break that cycle for, next generation. So yeah, it's always a tricky one.
I agree. So what's one thing that you may have had that you felt was a weakness that you've turned into a strength and utilized today?
Yeah, I think, again, when we first start, we're just trying to do whatever we can just to survive, really. I always look at those first couple of, first year or 2 years as really survival mode. And I think when I first started, I probably could have been, definitely my weakness at that stage was, really looking at my numbers and my finances. So even though I still had all my accounting set up, and I still, here in Australia, were required, if you're registered for GST, to give the government a thing called your business activity statement, your BAS statement every quarter. And even though that I was ticking all those boxes, I really never looked at my numbers at the beginning. It was kind of more of a tick and flick. And so my weakness was then, going, not really understanding where I stood with my business, what I was doing from a financial point, and just kind of making decisions without really having that financial strategy behind it. Whereas now my numbers, and what I work with my own consulting clients they're massive, right? Like, we're looking at data all the time, because if you can look at data, you can see what's working, what isn't working, and then change your strategy based on that, or as a component of that, I should say. So yes, my weakness at the beginning was definitely my finances, where now, again, the accountants provide me with monthly updates. I've got, I'm now doing profit first, which is great. So that's what I definitely would say was my weakness at the beginning, which is now turn into a strength. Still something that I work on every single month as I get better and better and bigger. But the weakness was definitely the finances at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where maybe you wear a lot of hats to begin with, and then it's something that you focus on as a priority and learn as you go, and kind of, like you said, get bigger and get better because you're forced to in order to scale.
Yep. And I would say it's not just finances. I would say like numbers collectively. If I had to kind of really overarch it, like I didn't really look at Google Analytics at the beginning. I didn't, again, look at those financial numbers. I didn't look at my social media, not my numbers in regards to fans, but my actual, data. What time are they coming on? How long are they staying on for? What are they reading? What are they interested in? What's my bounce rate? Like all of those numbers, which are super important for e-commerce and service-based business to be able to write content, understand product development, particularly a variety of other things. Yeah, it just wasn't. I was like, oh yeah, we'll just keep buying this, or oh yeah, we'll just keep doing this. Where now it's like, buy only if you need to, or write particular articles. So there's so much value in knowing your numbers, not just your financial numbers, but just your numbers collectively.
Yeah, that data-driven process can help you scale faster where you understand what the user needs and basically deliver it to them.
100%. Yes.
So I really appreciate you stopping by. Can you leave a piece of advice for the audience, professional or personal?
I guess I'll leave two. Personal is obviously one, in the event of burnout or anything like that for your own individual self, I would say make sure that you take care of yourself. And I know it's easier said than done. But if in the event that you really are feeling those lows or those highs or anything in between, always make sure that, just be mindful that your regular doctor or your GP is there to be able to help you out. And that, it's something important to make sure that you not only take care of your physical health, but obviously your mental health. And if I had to believe with anything on a business level, I would just be mindful about how you interact with your clients on a regular basis. And what I'm talking about more specifically is from a human-to-human marketing basis. And when I say human-to-human marketing, I'm talking about the marketing that pertains to the experience and the interaction one faces with a particular brand. So often I see people focused on B2B and B2C, but they're forgetting ultimately, at the end of the day, the people that they are selling to are actually humans. And if, one of the things I talk about when I do different speaking events is, most recent studies have concluded that your customers are human, but yet people are so driven by automating everything through bots and emails. And I believe there's a place for automation, especially when you're scaling, but you need to remember that again, people are longing for human connectiveness. People are looking for a point of difference. And if you think about the book that Seth Godin talks about in Purple Cow, he talks about using this beautiful scenery in France, and he's driving, and there's brown cows and white cows and black cows, but eventually they become old and boring. And I think there's a lot of businesses that are becoming old and boring because they're trying to do what everyone else is doing. And you must stand out and be the purple cow, because if you can be the purple cow, you become remarkable, you become memorable. And you do that through that human-to-human marketing, that constant, what interaction are you having with your clients and what experiences are you making for them to come back. And I genuinely believe that conversation is conversion. If you take the time to get to know your people who are human beings and you have really rich and lovely conversations with them, through time when the trust is there, the rapport is there, you will see the conversion. And the last thing I just want to leave with is that through that human-to-human marketing connectiveness is that I've learned that, and this is a quote that I've heard over the years, is that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so again, by having those interactions and those experiences, you are going to be memorable. And when that happens, there is a feeling that is evoked because you've taken time to get to know them, and you will stand out and be the purple cow. So that's my kind of little advice at the end.
That's 100%. I agree with that. I kind of highlight that a lot of the time because ultimately it's branding. It's what makes your brand, stand out, and why your brand is human. You may have 10 other people or businesses in your space, but if all they are is pushing out content, sell, but not showing kind of their human factor, their people, what they're about, their value proposition, their kind of founding principles, that, that product within that vertical may be the same exact thing for those 10 companies, but they're buying from you because you're different and you're individual and you have that kind of personal connection. And I wholeheartedly agree with that emotional component. So if you have obviously content or, the messaging that leaves a emotional trigger with the audience or the user, they're gonna remember you over competitor because you made them feel a certain way. Usually, obviously, happiness or positive emotion.
Yes, 100%. And that's what, you know what I mean? When people have to look at, say, it says, I'm a business consultant. If people are looking at 5 different business consultants and we all are the same brown and black cows, but I'm the one that's gotten on the phone call. I'm the one, not a sales team, but it's been me. I've done the follow-up email, et cetera, et cetera. I've taken time to get to know them. When it comes down to choose, people buy based on emotional, motivators. And people nowadays specifically are really interested in people taking that extra step. And I believe old will become the new again. And what I mean by that is that back in the day, you used to pick up the phone. You used to, you really did connect with people. You look at the yellow pages, or the phone books back in the days. Like there was a different way of connecting. And I think people, especially in first world countries where, again, our depression and our anxiety and our suicide rates are much higher than the majority of other countries in the world, there's something to be said about being able to connect with your audience.
I agree. So I really appreciate you coming on today. Can you let the audience know how they can find you?
Sure. Yes. There's, I guess, 3 different ways that you can find me. One is I have a very active Facebook community called the Australian Business Collaborative. Now, please note, it's not just for Aussies. It's just because I now live in Australia that it's called Australian Business Collaborative. The next way you can connect with me is I also have a podcast, weekly podcast that goes out called Business and Life Conversations with Angela Henderson. And you can find that on all major platforms just by searching for Business and Life Conversations with Angela Henderson. And lastly, I offer, so much advice over on my website, which is angelahenderson.com.au. And yes, over there, you'll find different content that can help you grow your business. And also there's a 30-minute discovery call if you're ready to invest in yourself, both emotionally and financially, to have someone help you in this space from a business consultant and coach. And I'd love for you to hop on a call. So yes.
Awesome. Thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks so much. You have an awesome day.
Hey everyone, this is Roman Prokopchuk from Roman Prokopchuk's Digital Savage Experience podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, so that's always good. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
This podcast has been brought to you by Nova Zora Digital. Find out how Nova Zora Digital can help your company grow online. Learn more at novazoradigital.com. Until next time, all you digital savages.